very much, Felicity. Rushanara, please.
Thank you very much. Mr. Greensill, I've got a number of questions, so we'll try and rattle through as quickly as possible. First, I have some questions about the lobbying process. Can you just talk me through what representations you and David Cameron made on your behalf, your company's behalf, to the Chancellor or Treasury officials about Greensill Capital's application to the Coronavirus Large Business Interruption Loan, the SIL bills loan, the design of that scheme, and the criteria for accreditation to the SIL bill scheme, including in the meeting that took place on the 24th of April 2020, please?
Ms. Ali, neither Mr. Cameron, to my knowledge, and certainly not I, we did not make any representations to the, with respect to the setup of the CL Bills program. And the only conversation I ever had with the Treasury on that topic was a conversation which I had with the second permanent secretary at the Treasury, where I informed him after the scheme had been put in place and it had been announced by the British Business Bank that we were now able to extend loans under that facility, that it would be helpful, given the level of interest that we had seen, if we would be able to have the higher limit of 200 million instead of 50 million. And the British Business Bank had informed us that that was a decision that only the Treasury could make. Hence I raised it with the second permanent secretary, and he subsequently wrote to me and said that he would need to see a request from the British Business Bank requesting him to do so. And as you would have seen in the correspondence from the Chancellor, no such request was ever forthcoming from the British Business Bank.
So it's really interesting because 27 days of different days, Mr. Cameron lobbied government ministers and advisors, 56 emails and WhatsApps and counting, and other text messages. And for those of us who understand how lobbying works, the reality is you got what you wanted in the end, didn't you, Mr. Greensill? 400 million, is my understanding from press reports, of the SIL bills loans to GFG-linked companies provided by your company. So the lobbying did pay off, even if it, albeit through a different vehicle, through the British Business Bank and, which is overseen by BIS. You did actually get a positive outcome, right?
Ms. Ali, as I say, I didn't have any discussion, and you'll have to ask Mr. Cameron whether he did, but I didn't have any discussion with any government official in the Treasury or the Bank of England concerning the CL Bills facility or our eligibility for it until after the British Business Bank had determined that we were eligible. Right. And announced it publicly.
Right. And BIS, did anyone have any links with the business department? Okay. So can you just confirm the press reports that Greensill loaned a total of 400 million in the SIL bills GFG linked companies, and it was split out across 8 loans of 50 million? And could you just confirm that?
No, as I mentioned earlier, I'm afraid I'm not permitted to make any customer specific.
This is about the past, and we're here to talk about the past and what your involvement. You've arrived in this committee. You've apologised for the 1,000 jobs lost in your own company and others related. I think you owe it to the British people to answer the question, Mr. Greensill.
I'm afraid, as I explained to your chair before I spoke, I've had very clear instruction from the administrator of Greensill and indeed from my legal advisors, and you will have noted the letter from the FCA. I'm simply not able to comment about specific customers, but I will help you in any way I can with your inquiries.
No, I think that people will infer from your inability or reluctance to come clean and be transparent on this committee, on this parliamentary committee, which you claim to have respect for, that actually, given the 50 million cap it was, you know, that actually what you were doing was you were deliberately restructuring in order to take advantage, and you were actually doing something that was beyond the scope of what should have happened. There was something improper went on here, which led to 100 million of loans being provided.
Exactly. Greensill Capital was selected by the British Business Bank as being eligible to operate the scheme. The credit that we extended to our customers complied with our ordinary credit rules and procedures, which were scrutinised by the British Business Bank. Each facility that we provided was reviewed by a top-tier London law firm, and where there was any question about the interpretation of the British Business Bank rules, we actually had that leading law firm directly discuss the matter with the British Business Bank in order to ensure that it did comply with the rules. So it is my opinion that every facility that we provided complied with the British Business Bank rules.
Interesting. And can you just talk me through how many other CLBILS loans Greensill made, or did you only loan to GFG-linked companies?
We provided facilities to other customers under the British Business Bank facilities. So not only to a single group, for example.
And how many of them would you be able to say?
I wouldn't be able to say.
Right. And is that because of the point you made earlier?
That's right. I'm not permitted to talk to you about customer confidential information. We're a financial institution. It's simply not something that I can discuss in an open forum, our clients' confidential information.
So just going back to the Lord Minor's evidence session, and obviously you've addressed some points that the chair has raised. Lord Minor's talked about the cost of, told this committee that the total cost to the taxpayer from the Greensill scandal would amount to £3 to £5 billion, including £1 billion in direct costs. And as you've heard the chair, he was quoted in our committee as saying, "I left the meeting traveling down in the lift thinking of myself, this has many elements of a Ponzi scheme." You have come into this committee today and you have discredited his evidence. You've tried to discredit his evidence. Who should we believe, Lord Minor's or you? Who's lying? Who's not telling us the truth here in this committee? The public deserve to know the truth, Mr. Greensill.
Certainly, Ms. Ali, I have told the committee the truth today.
So are you saying Lord Minor's lied to this committee?
Ms. Ali, I'm telling you what I have told you is the truth, and it is supported by written evidence.
Right. So Lord Minor's is not telling the truth and you are. Is that what you're saying?
What I've said is I've given a correct account based on my knowledge and recollection and written evidence.
The point is, you've admitted to the failure and the cost yourself in jobs and the associated losses to other companies.
I have.
Lord Minor's has talked about the amount, £1 billion direct costs, and it's in other referenced by others as well, right? And 3.5 billion indirect. What do you have to say to that? Is he lying about that in your opinion, or is he telling the truth? And is everybody else, I mean, it seems like you're gaslighting here. You know, you've blamed the insurance company, you're blaming Lord Minor's, but the company that has cost the taxpayer money is your company, and it's you.
I don't recognise or know how Lord Minor's came up with the numbers that he shared with this committee 2 weeks ago, and I haven't seen him publish a breakdown of how he arrived at that. I certainly have noted that others have quoted Lord Minor's since then, but I haven't seen how he arrived at that number. But perhaps if we pause and let's see if we can work the number out together.
1 billion was
right.
Not just Lord Minor's. That number has been in the public domain a very long time. So how would you calculate it? What has been the loss to the taxpayer?
There has been no loss to the taxpayer, Ms. Ali.
There has been no loss. So once again, Lord Miners is not telling the truth, is not giving the correct facts. Others who have given evidence are not giving the correct facts, but you are. We are expected to believe there's no loss, and you are telling the truth here.
The total amount of, we've just been talking about the CL Bills facilities. So the total quantum of CL Bills facilities that Greensill Capital extended was £400 million. The total amount of C-Bills facilities that we extended was £18.5 million. C-Bills and CL Bills facilities are guaranteed to the extent of 80% of the amount of the loan.
The knock-on effect on a company, on the seal company, and the knock-on effect in terms of jobs and consequences will amount to a greater deal of expense to the taxpayer.
Ms. Ali, you asked me how the calculation around the billion direct cost was calculated. What I'm trying to do is help you to get to the facts here. So the total amount of guarantees that from the British Business Bank, the guaranteed amount is £334,800,000.
Interesting. So but the indirect costs, we're talking about direct and indirect costs. Can I just, I'm going to move on to the question in relation to, and you may, once again, you may not answer this question, but I hope you will. Can you just talk us through when you started working with Mr. Gupta and his company, and when your company started doing that? Is that allowed? Are you allowed to answer that question?
I think some of that is actually in the public domain, so I'm prepared to comment on the parts that are in the public domain, Ms. Ali, as I'm genuinely trying to be helpful to you. I believe that I met Mr. Gupta back in 2015. I was actually introduced to him by an executive at Euler Hermes, who's one of the largest insurance companies in the world. We did a very small amount of business with Mr. Gupta initially, and that over time increased.
That over time, that increased?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I just have one more question in relation to insurance. You talked about the insurance company earlier, about the insurance facility not being, one of the reasons for the collapse of Greensill. Can you just explain how you come to that conclusion? Furthermore, a bit more about how you come to the conclusion that your company. Why should the public believe that that's the reason why your company collapsed, rather than the points that Felicity raised about the business model that your company used?
Well, Felicity has her own opinion, but you've asked me my opinion. What we've done is we have taken cash flows, which we collect from the accounting systems of our clients in real time, and made that information available to investors so that they are able to invest in the real economy in a way that hadn't ever been able to be done by anybody other than banks before. And through doing that, we've been able to provide finance to millions of businesses in over 150 countries. And those people did not do business with me, Ms. Ali, because of our brand or because of our marketing expense. They did business with us for one reason and one reason only, and that is they got a better deal from us than they could get from their banks. And so actually, what I would say is, to those millions of businesses and employees who made use of our technology, they voted with their feet. It is absolutely correct. We ultimately failed, Ms. Ali. So there clearly was a flaw in our business. But the fundamental truth is, taking real-time information out of corporate accounting systems and using that information to make credit decisions and make lower cost credit available completely electronically to small businesses and consumers around the world absolutely is the future. But the way that I did it definitely has flaws. And the insurance value.
Sorry, running out of time, but what your conduct, your company's conduct, is hardly an advertisement for that kind of credit and small businesses to small businesses. And in fact, what we've seen is a concentration of risk. What we've seen is that unsecured loans, in effect, have been provided. And you haven't helped businesses, you've actually damaged the reputation of legitimate supply chain finances. And to conclude, in fact, Miners has a point, doesn't he? It is a Ponzi scheme. It is, frankly, it smacks of fraudulent behavior, and it franks of the sort of stuff we saw conducted by the likes of Madoff in the financial crisis. That's what it smacks of. It doesn't smack of a proper process where people can get supply chain finance that is reliable and credible.
Exactly. When I started Greensill, no member of this committee, or indeed I think almost any institution, had heard of supply chain finance. Now, every major financial institution in the world offers it as a product, rather like a checking account to a corporate. That has meant that tens of millions of businesses have benefited from that.
Yeah, though, Mr. Greensill, isn't the problem here? It's not about innovation around a particular way to finance. Isn't the problem here that you and David Cameron, who pushed for this while you were an advisor in government, and then you and David Cameron stood to benefit from that process? The idea might have been a good one, but there is a clear conflict of interest here. You didn't do, your idea might have been valuable to the world of finance, but what you created ultimately, and the conduct of lobbying in the way that had happened, using a former prime minister, frankly, bringing that position into disrepute to benefit, to profit, is where the problem lies, and going so far that actually many would argue you and Mr. Cameron lost sight of what was appropriate behaviour and appropriate action in terms of providing supply chain finance.
Bizarrely, the beneficiaries of Greensill and the business model that we developed, which is now being copied by thousands of financial institutions around the world, has not been a great boon to financial institutions. The reason it has grown as it has is because it's helped tens of millions of businesses.
That's not the point here. The point is, and many of our experts who gave evidence recently talked about where the positives are to supply chain finance. The question is whether what you created and what you were selling was actually proper supply chain finance or a Ponzi scheme. And I state to you that your scheme was something quite different from a proper, appropriate supply chain finance process that protects the public interest. And in fact, what your company did is lose taxpayer billions potentially, indirectly, and certainly a few hundred million up to $1 billion of public money. I'm going to stop there because I know others